Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Happy pandemic.
Thanks.
Rock on.
Okay, so for the uninitiated and people who are watching who have no idea who you are, just see these two strange people, like, can you tell us who you
Who the
are?
fuck are we? Right? You want us to tell people who we are?
Yes.
Yes. That's your cue.
We were watching it was like that Netflix movie about Blockbuster Video, and they had the guy from Tromaville, and they were like, "Tell us who you are, say your name," and he was like, "Why?"
Don't you know who I am? Have you done research?
You didn't do any research, did you? You don't know who the fuck I am.
well, I can start because
No. That was just a joke.
Joking.
I'm Josh.
No, okay.
And
I'm
you go,
Miranda.
there you go, good. And we're Clutter. We run the Clutter Gallery, and we run 5 Points Festival and the Designer Toy Awards, and we make toys with our friends. We've been around for how many years? 18?
Forever.
17, 18 years?
Yes, mother.
It's kind of crazy how much stuff you do. I mean, and you run like an online store and you make toys, and you yourself, Josh, you make toys yourself under your own brand. I'm
represented by Clutter.
Of course.
So
but like, could you do any more? And then I was joking before you guys were on, like, you also have like 6 million kids, right?
Yes, 3. But yes, it feels like 6 million.
Yes.
And we just got a puppy. So yeah.
Hold on. What the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm Sarah and I are just pulling our hair out with like 2 kids, and I feel like we don't do half as much as you guys do. 3 kids and then now a puppy? Like, sorry. Like, what the fuck are you thinking?
we just think that it's a good idea and we do it. We don't think that's the problem.
I mean, we've like it's all magically worked since we met.
Yes.
We were laughing about it just the other day. We're like, and now we've lived through a pandemic together.
Yeah.
We've just been through so much in the last, we've been married for 10 years. We've been running Clutter for 10 years. Or is it 11 years now this year? This year is 11.
Yeah.
So, and it's crazy because last year, 2020 was the 10th annual Designer Toy Awards. This year is the 11th annual. So we're going to do the 10th and 11th annual Designer Toy Awards all at once.
We had such big plans for it too. We had like a
God.
really cool venue. We're going to do like this giant show, like really blow up the Designer Toy Awards this year and make it just like the best one ever. And
then the world just went.
Yeah.
So
best laid plans.
So 10 and 11 will happen together, but it'll probably be like not a full thing. Like it'll be a venue, it'll be a thing, but we'll see how many people actually come.
Right.
This year,
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. I guess the other thing that you didn't mention is that Clutter started out as a magazine, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Remember those old archaic things called magazines?
I know, and we talk about bringing it back at least once a month, right? I think it's like, how are we going to fit that into our schedule?
Well, we have 3 books.
We do
in the works, which
slowed
down during the pandemic, but our thought was to do books instead of magazines, just because every magazine took so much time.
Sure. I mean, every magazine is a book. If you just make the spine a little square, like, people will put it on their shelf and keep it forever. And the magazine, they're like, okay, I read that, and they'll just toss it.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're just sort of like, our thinking has kind of moved over to this other, to the left a little bit.
And everything we do is an extension of the magazine. Like, the magazine was there to promote artists and to give them a spotlight, and that's what we bring to everything that we do. So it's not like we stop doing the magazine and stop thinking that way. We do that's everything that we do. But the magazine is my first love, so I would love to go back to.
I don't know if I agree that everything we do is an extension of the magazine, but it's an extension of the brand.
The idea of
it's the brand. It's the love. It's the family. It's the community of the magazine.
Yeah.
It's the extension of that.
That's
Well, I think you two should fight about it. We'll just watch.
Let's have it.
No. I mean,
how dare you disagree with me?
I think it's what was that thing you did to me that one time? Like,
how dare you contradict me?
How dare you contradict me? We almost got divorced that day.
Wow.
She was a very British.
She went into like a full dictator mode. I was like,
You'd
oh
say the
shit.
Brits are dictators?
Oh, they are.
Parliamentary dictators.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
So let's go back to the beginning. So the magazine starts in what year?
2004.
2004. Wow, that's insane. And you were in the UK when you started that?
I was in England, yeah, merry old England. We spent a lot of time in New York, though. We'd come to Toy Fair and Comic Con and all the cool things that were happening out here. Because they're really, the scene in the UK was much smaller. Even though back then there were plenty of shops, Play Lounge in London.
Sure.
Maharishi did amazing shows. They had, we met Michael Lau there, we met Futura, we met Jamie Hewlett, like all of the big guys had shows at Maharishi. So back then it was really an epicenter.
And then slowly all of those stores kind of fizzled and went away.
Yeah, unfortunately.
There's just not enough people in the UK.
I don't think it's a lack of people. People won't travel in the UK. We always had trouble getting people to go from like a London show to a Manchester show, or a London show to a Birmingham show, or go to Bristol. Like they get stuck in the city that they live in, and it's very hard to travel outside of it. I don't know, it's the mentality. Maybe it's changed in the last 11 years since I moved.
I think it's probably gotten worse during the pandemic.
Oh, sure, but
So.
But I think that's true. Like, I mean, you'd think that like San Diego from us is like 2 hours away. Like, how often do I go to San Diego?
right. But
I
if there was,
don't.
or was there a show you would go to?
But we
it?
would.
You would travel to it.
And
I don't know.
Like, the drop of a dime if it was
I don't
cool.
know.
We would. We're
We
like,
would, and people, drive to the gallery shows from all over the place and fly in from all
Yeah.
over the place.
even
so,
in the pandemic, people have done some crazy shit.
yeah, driven here,
One artist drove up from Tennessee,
something like that.
and they were like, it's not illegal because we're not staying for more than 24 hours. And we're like,
We're like, whoa,
great.
okay.
Wow. All right. So magazine 2004, and then how does that evolve? Can you walk me through it? How does...
So the magazine was still going. I moved to New York in 2009. You kind of dragged me here.
Yes.
Really, we met in 2009, and he dragged me here,
Yes.
and then we got married. So the magazine came here, and you had an animation.
So
web
back
studio.
back in the early 2000s and late 1990s, I had an animation studio, and my studio was right around the corner from Kid Robot. So I was like watching the scene evolve, and I studied sculpture, and so I was kind of watching it all happen. And then Tristan Eaton actually was a junior art director for my company. So
Lots of cross connections.
while he was working, he was moonlighting for Kid Robot while he was working for me. So when Miranda and I met, it was kind of like
we had all the same
friends. We were into the same shit, and I was looking for a new way to. I was really excited about having a brand to play with. So I, when we got together, it was like we kind of swapped companies in the beginning.
True.
And Miranda took over my web studio, and I took over the magazine for a while.
Was that
And
conscious? Like there was a conversation that took place, like, hey, you're gonna handle this, I'm gonna handle it.
No, I'm just super detail oriented. So I came in and was like, okay, I got this. I can do all
she
this
took
stuff.
over,
And
like we were working for all these
yeah.
big companies, and Miranda was like, I got this. She was like,
Yeah.
I'll run all these projects. And I was
And
like,
I
cool,
did-
I'll build out an advertising campaign and enlist the aid of all these people around the world to start creating an exclusives, thing around the brand, and like really explore like what Clutter could be.
Right. And my background was in graphic design. I went to uni for graphic design. So I have a degree in graphic design. And it was like made sense for me. We always did like projects on the side when we were doing the magazine to earn some money, because the magazine really didn't do much. So I was always kind of working in those kind of fields. So it made sense to just like jump in there.
Yeah. And so
Do it.
we got this really, oh, sorry.
So what was it about designer toys that made you want to make a magazine at first?
Me? Oh, well, I collected key and I collected bear bricks, more key than bear bricks, but I was just a toy collector. I collected living dead dolls. I collected McFarlane toys. Like I just loved toys. And so we would start going to shows in London at Play Lounge and all those places. And I got a magazine from Hong Kong through the door. And I couldn't read it, but I could understand there were shows happening in London and that things were happening around the world. And there was no real online community. There was the Kid Robot boards were just starting, but everybody bought from eBay. There was no real, it wasn't like it is now.
Sure.
There wasn't the same access to information. or access to buying toys really. So we went down one day, we finished uni, I finished my degree, and that magazine dropped through the door. And so I called Nick, who started the magazine with me, and was like, hey, do you want to start a magazine? Because if it doesn't work, then we have experience, and if it does, then we've made ourselves nice jobs here.
Right.
So we called some of our friends up and asked them what they thought, who were in the industry, and they were like, yes, you should absolutely do that. So
Like,
we actually got a Prince's Trust loan in England.
so, yeah, what is that?
So Prince Charles runs a charity that gives money to young entrepreneurs.
Interesting.
So yeah, we got a loan.
Let's get some of the royal
Get some of
Charles
that royal
money.
money. Yeah.
So wait, did you have to pay that back, or is that kind of like a
We
gift?
did have to pay it back, but it was a really low rate, so it was fine. So
Very
we
cool.
Awesome if we still owed Prince Charles money.
Yeah.
All right.
Some of it was a loan and some of it was a grant, and then our families gave us some money, and that's how we started it. Yeah.
Nice. Now there were some other magazines at the time, right? I mean, I remember there was like Play from Play Imaginative.
That started after us, but yeah.
That started, yeah, and there was a couple, and you seem to have you seem to have survived longer than all the rest.
We did survive longer than all the rest.
I think there were a couple others that were just like 1 or 2 issues and then fizzled.
Yeah.
Hard to sustain. But then I like the turn that you made, like making the magazine into something, because eventually it became free, right?
Yes.
And it became advertiser based, and you started giving it out at conventions, which, for me, I mean, I just loved it. Like, you would send us a pallet of them, we'd take them to San Diego, and we just like hand them out to everyone. And it was sort of this, there were some like reoccurring articles that were just like explanations of the scene. And it was sort of like this handshake,
Primer articles, the 101s.
The primer, there was like
The
a
primers,
primer issue. We should just publish that as a
When we
book.
talk about that all the time, it's just publishing those articles as like
and expanding
versions.
those articles,
Yeah.
because it's interesting how the nuances of the verbiage changes over time, and we become smarter, and we go back and read them and go like, oh, we didn't quite understand some of the shit that we were saying 10 years ago, and we read those articles.
I refer back to it often because you have a nice there's a nice paragraph in there about borrowing from pop culture.
Yeah.
And every lawyer that I've talked to has always cautioned me, I mean, multiple times, to the point where people think it's funny. Like, people on in a chat here will ask me a question, and I always say I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving you legal advice. And I say that so often that like people make fun of me for it now. But you guys outlined some very basic concepts in there about how these issues could be prosecuted if someone actually had an issue, right? And the bottom line is that it's up to a judge and a jury. And even though this was explained to me by an attorney, it was always a caveat, like, be careful who you tell this to and how you tell it to, because then you become an attorney in fact. And then if they think you're an attorney, they could sue you and blah, 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 blah. And so I always just love to say, well, in Clutter, it says.
I think we did a chart at one point about
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse and copyright protection. And our thinking has really evolved in the last 18 months, because we've gotten deeper. So we give fake legal advice all the time.
Very cool.
Very cool.
All right. So then the magazine starts, you come to the United States, you're running an animation studio, and then what happens next?
People tried to buy the web company several times from us, like some of the bigger agencies.
I was just telling someone about that.
And we never wanted to do that, because then our lives would have been owned by somebody else, and we wouldn't have been able to do Clutter on the side. And a lot of how we grew Clutter into what it is now and what we do now was funded by the stuff that we did on the website.
Yeah, that was the funny story that I love to tell people. It's very organic. There wasn't like ever one moment where it went from being a this to a that. It was like it was like 3 steps forward over here, 10 steps back over here, and then like all of a sudden seven steps forward in this place. And it was it was very, very organic growth. When we were running Clutter on the side as a magazine, we got hired by EA Games to build this massive website. And so based on that project money, we built the Designer Toy Awards. So the Designer Toy Awards actually really was the first real kind of other project that we did that came to fruition.
Right.
And what year was the first year Designer Toy Awards?
2011.
2011. But the actual idea was conceived well before I left England. We were at Pete Fowler and his manager's Rob Manley's studio in London, and we were all talking like, how do you legitimize this little art scene as something more than what it is? And we were all talking about they were like, you should really do an awards ceremony. So that was kind of where the idea came from, and that's why we asked Pete to design the awards, because it happened that German, the idea was like back then.
Nice.
We originally launched the Designer Toy Awards in 2011
in San Diego.
And and just based on that experience, we realized how serious people were willing to take it and how serious we could make it. And so over the last decade, we really, turned it into a foundation.
I was at that award show, and it's hard to imagine that was 11 years ago.
Oh, right.
Years ago.
I mean, that's like so fucked up. I mean, I have so many more gray hairs now, but it's still like, I can look in the mirror and tell, but really like, it seems like yesterday.
Right.
It's
when you look at
when those,
photos, it really feels like yesterday.
yeah, it's crazy. When those 80-year-old people tell you like your life goes by really fast, and you're like, you're full of shit. Like, I don't believe you. And then you're like, holy shit, like I don't even know where the past 10 years went. Okay, so how do we get to the gallery?
Right.
Well, we rented this space without getting too nitty gritty.
Right.
We got the space in Beacon.
Yes.
And this was our office.
Mainly for the website of it. But we had all our toys that we wanted to have them out on display. And we had this giant barn in the middle of the woods. And why are we in the middle of the woods?
Well, that was when we first moved out of Brooklyn, we went to the barn.
Right.
And then we left the barn when we came to here to Beacon.
And we could walk to a coffee shop, and we were excited about being.
But you're getting so nitty gritty.
I'm not. I'm
trying
sorry. I'm giving
trying to fast forward.
All right, I'll be quiet. You guys fight about it.
And then on Tuesday, I was like,
yeah.
So we did our first show with Rutherford.
Yes.
Back in 2000 and
oh God, I don't know, 11 or 12.
After the Designer Toy Awards, we did our first gallery show here.
Yeah.
And very quickly we came to realize that we wanted that to be like our monthly, what we were spending our time thinking about. That in the magazine. So around and then in that time period, we did that year, Dov, that you brought up, where we switched to a free magazine.
Yes.
And that year, we just we gave it our all. We published 12 issues that year.
We did.
That's insane.
Yes.
I don't know how we did it, but we did it.
And at the end of that year, we looked at the numbers and we were like, it's not possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We gave it our all.
We did.
And there was never made enough money to pay for the staff.
It's crazy. I mean, before this conversation, I thought you guys were fucking nuts, and just to let you know, I still think you're nuts.
Yeah, we are.
We are.
It's fine.
But okay. So when is the first in action show?
Well, the next one is next year's the 10th, so that must be 2011.
That doesn't make any sense.
2012.
First Designer
Toy
Toy
13.
was 11 years ago in 2021.
Yeah, but you have to count the first one is
2009.
What year was Pixie born?
No, 2011.
So it was 2010.
2010.
Because I was pregnant with Pixie.
When we went to San Diego,
yes.
right?
Right.
So we got married in 2009.
So it was 2011.
2010.
We don't know.
So the first Designer
It's
Toy
so
Awards
been
was
so
2010 in San Diego.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
But when was the first in action show?
2012, because this year is the 9th year.
Right.
2012.
2022 will be the 10th annual in action figure.
Got it. Nice. So
it's like we're a beautiful mind. We're building what year were we? Where were we? And who was I drunk with?
well, let's talk about the in action show, because that's kind of the nitty gritty here, and what I think everybody watching right now, wants to know about.
Yes.
So talk about
Tell you about it.
Tell us about it.
What?
Edit stuff.
It's like,
Well,
talk about
I've been a fan of Sucklord
Yeah.
since I remember going
before
to.
you knew me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember when Star Wars Breakbeats, the CD came out in Mondo on St. Mark's in New York City. And I remember the A-Life show where he showed his first figures. And so like, I've been a fan of Sucklord since I'm probably 19 years old, like a long fucking time. So, you know, I was collecting his work, and we just sort of, this germ of an idea started that we needed to show all of these artists working in this genre. And I remember like we were trying to work very closely with Healy at that point, and we were trying to figure out what would set our gallery apart. And an action figure was probably, it's the first show where we did it and we're like, well, we should do that again. You know, and because we kind of built up our gallery around these concepts that have a place throughout the year. And and the first one that really just stuck was that. And I don't know if it was the first or second year where like Sucklord came up, Healy was here,
It was the first year.
Scott Wachowski
Was here.
was it the first year or
Yeah,
the second
Tom
year?
was here. Everyone
Like
was
all
here.
these
DLL
artists
was
came,
here.
right? Tom from Sidekick came. Like we threw this show. We had the idea for the show. We threw the show, and everybody came, and it became like a little mecca for that world. And
every year since then, it's become the same thing. All the artists get together, and it's really great for them to have a space to meet up and see each other when they don't necessarily. We're in here, so people want to come in.
Yeah, there's pictures of Dollar Slice and Morgan naked in the middle of the night, right after an action figure. You know, and like just terrible videos of people doing awful shit.
But at the time,
get this crowd together and people get wild.
But at the time, 2010, 2011, resin figures weren't really seen by very many people as part of the scene, I think. And even like resin was just starting to creep in. But there was a long time where people just thought resin, you know, if it wasn't a vinyl toy, like they wouldn't collect it, and resin didn't count. I mean, now all bets are off. Now it doesn't matter. You make it out of shit and it looks good. Like people will be like, that's amazing.
I think it always had a place in our hearts, though.
I think we always.
The magazine.
I mean, when we first met, I was buying Sucklord figures immediately. Like that was kind of, so for me, that was part of it. I think that as editors or writers of the magazine, we understood the place of the in-action figure, because we understood that it was interesting artistically in ways that a lot of, you know, there's a lot of vinyl figures being made all the time, and very often we'll look at someone and be like, well, that's not a great figure and that's not a great piece. But the world of the bootleg action figure, it's so honest that you generally have to appreciate almost anything that's being made by an artist because it's coming straight out of their minds. It's like, I think that we really quickly realized that the bootleg action figure is like the most primal version of a designer toy.
I mean, I often refer to it like as folk art, and it doesn't fit the exact definition of folk art, because folk art needs to, you know, has to be like, there's rules for folk art. You can't be trained, and it has to be passed down from generation to generation, and you have to be self-taught. But to me, that's what this feels like. I mean, this feels like these are people who are not trained. They might have gone to art school or learned something, graphic design, but, you know, they didn't go to school to cast resin. They didn't go to school to make a toy or make an action figure, which people used to go to school, like go to toy school to figure out like how to make a He-Man figure and tooling and all that kind of stuff. And so this, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it feels like, you know, someone can come up with an idea and they can sculpt it or kit bash it, and they can make their own thing, and it doesn't require a factory in China to interpret.
There's no one to stop you from making a horrendous toy or making a great toy or expressing yourself. And also, because there's no editing, you get this train of derivation where it's like somebody makes this one figure, so somebody else makes this other figure, and you get to this point where it's like it's this totally derivative work, and sometimes you feel like, oh, this is just another one of those in bootleg figures, but then someone else will completely reinvent it again to where you're just like your mind is blown because you're like, oh, and it's maybe like the 7th version of that damn figure that you've seen, but this one just blows your mind. You're like, I have to have it.
Right.
So
That happens.
like,
That happens to us with. I'm sorry.
It's good.
We got stepped on by the internet. Say that again.
I was just saying it's like this. It's almost in this endless cycle of derivation and regurgitation and inside humor, but because there's no one to stop it, it really does reinvent itself all the time. And you know, I'm always surprised and find myself needing these goddamn bootleg action figures, even though like I've sworn off buying them like 10,000 times because we already own a million of them.
Right.
And I see one, I'm like, I have to have it.
Yeah, it's true. The other thing that I would say in terms of a gallery show too, it's actually because it's so close to popular culture and things people in the general public understand. It's one of our most popular shows for people just walking off the street. Because a lot of the times they're walking there, but like, what the hell is all this? But these, they can be like, oh, I understand this.
Right.
You know, it's not 10 paces away from, well, it's a toy, but
It's
this
really
is like
sophisticated like that, actually, because it's like the average person can look at it and kind of glom onto the idea of what it is they're looking at.
right.
But then as they go down, as they walk through the gallery, they get to some of these figures and they're like, what the fuck is that?
And then
Right.
And I'm not being, I'm not trying to be vulgar. It's literally,
No, sure, but they have a cultural reference point for it.
Yes, exactly.
well, my favorite figure right now in our show is the green plastic tunnels.
Oh, yeah, you like that one.
Because
You
it
always
makes,
like green plastic
well, I
tunnels,
love
so
green
yeah,
plastic
me
tunnels
too.
because he
Sure.
abstracts it. He abstracts the form, which I think is really important. And he put a piece in this year's show that I can't for the life of me remember the name of it. I could go
It's like
grab it.
Wildcat,
It's
Battlecat.
he's distilled the action figure form to its most base level where it makes no sense if you're
Right.
not us.
I think you should grab it.
Okay,
Okay.
because it's literally like he sent it in because he knew that like I would buy it because I'm gonna be like,
It's hilarious. Yeah, I was talking to Mark Ultra the other day, and he was talking about the lane that they sort of occupy and how they try not to create any story for their creations. And by not creating any story, he can keep making the same figure over and over again. But that as soon as someone comes up with a character and has a story behind it, then people are already expecting the same thing, this another character in the line. And so he's been able to kind of keep going on, you know, these same 12 figures for a long time. And then he pointed out Green Plastic Tunnels, who, you know, will just take like a chunk of Lego or whatever and put it inside the blister and be like, all right, let's see it.
so this is called Battle Cat. And it's right, so it's a this
Yeah.
and a that,
Right.
and like, and if you don't know that this genre is a this and a that,
Right.
nothing.
He's reduced it down to its
He's reduced it down
simplest form.
primal, most base, like,
Sure.
and I love the thing because it's the rectangle
Yeah.
and a that,
Yeah, exactly.
and he called it Battle Cat because the colors
Right.
are like harken back to some thought.
Pretty good. Yeah. Janky, who's here, did something similar with his paint, with the paint chips. Two clutters ago, he did some with the GI Joe with the little like just slob of paint, and it was like,
Oh yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
and so yeah, that's it's amazing. All right, so then when does 5 Points start?
Oh, Wendy. So we
You have to tell, it's the story of the Designer Toy Awards again
it is
that led us forward,
right.
because we were doing, without getting again
Too
too
in the
political
weeds.
or in the weeds about who did what to who when.
Right.
We were showing every year at New York Comic Con.
You were curating the block, correct?
No.
No.
You weren't curious. So there you
No,
go. There you go.
yeah.
You're trying to put us in a
Yeah.
position. man.
Okay, sorry.
No, we didn't curate.
We
the
weren't
book,
curating the
so-
block. There were some
No.
other people who had been curating the block.
Oh,
We
okay.
came in
That's its own
after those.
story,
That's a
yeah.
separate story,
Okay.
not for public story.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Good one, though.
Yeah, and so we came in and said we'll help kind of wrangle the block
Right.
in return for more room. And so we had this really nice big area at New York Comic Con, and we were helping kind of massage people into coming to New York Comic Con. And then
Sure.
and then the Designer Toy Awards was the Saturday night party.
Right.
And it became kind of like the semi-official party of New York Comic Con, at least for our world.
Which we
All right.
threw ourselves for many years.
We just did it
Yeah.
the Saturday night of New York Comic Con
Right.
without really ever asking anybody for permission.
Right.
And then the people that
Right.
read kind of got to the point where they were like, hey, do you guys want to like make it official? Because you're already it's just happening. And so
Sure.
we got the Hammerstein Ballroom one year with Reed and
Mhm.
kind of built it up like that. And so our issue was always whenever we would try and have sponsors come in for the Designer Toy Awards, they wanted a package deal with New York Comic Con.
Right.
Mhm.
And like that was never going to happen.
No.
Mhm.
Corporate structure of New York Comic Con.
Right. So we would just bleed the money out every year for the Design Toy Awards and putting on that event. And
I see.
it's hard
So they
to,
were.
like get somebody to.
So you're doing all this work, and they have an ability to raise money, but you cannot
Right.
benefit from it because of
Right.
Yeah.
right.
So we got drunk.
We went to a convention and got.
We
drunk.
went to
Went to a small convention.
we went to a
where
small
we had a
East
booth.
Coast based comic book convention.
Who wanted us to throw something with
He
them.
was saying like we should do some kind of designer toy thing,
Mhm.
like a festival or a convention, a designer toy festival on the East Coast. And we were kind of there at this comic book thing in New Jersey, talking about that weekend. And it was such a there was nobody there. Like there were like 10 people at this
There
comic
was
book convention.
Zucklord and Ron and us and
And
Tara
Tara.
and Suburban Final when
Suburban
Rob was
Vinyl
still
there,
doing
right?
it.
And
Yeah.
the few of us were like, we were the East,
Zucklord
like the
kept
East,
getting into trouble.
big trouble. And so we were all there. So I went to the like local beer distributor and just bought way too much alcohol. And by like it was 1 o'clock on Saturday, we were trashed.
Right.
And this guy, and Miranda usually hates it when I'm trashed. This is a great story. So this guy comes up to us from the people who threw Play, what's it called?
Playfair?
Playfair.
Mhm.
One of the guys from Playfair came up to our booth at this
And
comic book
they
convention.
just did it like a few months before, and they had a custom show there.
That we helped them kind of put together,
but they picked people that
something.
weren't really customized.
They didn't
It was
understand
just
what they were-
weird. It was a weird thing.
They
that
did a
didn't
really
go
bad
well.
job.
Yeah.
And so the guy walks up to us, he goes, hey, hey, it's nice seeing you guys again. That Playfair thing was great. And we really think that we're thinking about, starting a designer toy thing on the East Coast. And I was like, you fucking suck.
I don't know what
You
doing.
didn't, you guys, like, that was terrible. You don't know what you're doing. And if you do anything without us, you're stupid. And Miranda's just like, she's like, yeah.
I was like, what is going on? Josh, like, stop.
She's normally like,
"He's
she's
right."
like, shut up, Josh, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
This time she was like, yeah. She was getting in the guy's face. And the
This
guy,
never normally works, so don't do things like this. on the
yeah,
regular.
this
You
is
were
like,
watching
this
like
was
a
1
fan.
in a million. Like I told the guy he was stupid and he was
Yeah.
like, what?
It's like,
And
all
so
right.
he was like, well, if you really think that, you should talk to my boss. And I was like, okay. And he gave me his boss's phone number. And then he's like walking away to get away from us because we're drunk. And we started chasing him down the aisle. We're like, we're not done with you. And so he runs off. But so literally, like I called his boss that Monday. And by that, I think by Wednesday, we were signing paperwork. Turns out that those guys were actually all former Reed employees.
And they started New York Comic Con.
Who had started New York Comic Con and
Yeah.
left and had their own convention company
Right.
now. And
Right.
so we,
And when we met them, they were a small boutique company. Like they had a handful of employees in this cool little spot in Connecticut, and they drove like little race cars around their offices and stuff.
so we super vibed with them.
Yeah, and we were like
So-
had the same kind of
Yeah. So we hatched
energy.
the plan to have a new home for the Designer Toy Awards
Mhm.
at a new convention on the East Coast. And so we called
Which
it,
we had been talking about doing for years. We were like, oh, we should do something, and like,
we could never figure out what we wanted it to be.
Right.
But then
Or
it
how we
happened
would do
very
it.
quickly. And so they basically, this really awesome company called Left Field funded the first year of 5 Points. And that's when we did it in Manhattan on the Lower East Side.
right.
And then while that
And-
was happening, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep on.
Yeah.
So while that was
That was
happening,
awesome though. It was
yeah,
such a,
that
it
was
was
a
such a
great
cool,
year.
yeah. It was,
like we
it
were
was
so
really-
happy.
And they gave us a like 101, like full on lesson on how to run a convention from the
Nice.
like ground
It,
up.
yeah,
We were
it was
in
weird
every meeting.
because
Like,
we were in every
yeah.
meeting, but we didn't actually have to do anything the first year. We
Yeah.
just showed up and went, no, make it like this,
and
do it like
these
that.
people and that people, and they ran everything.
Right.
We sat there and we learned everything that you could possibly learn, from fire regulations, how wide the aisles could be.
Right. So we got a
Mhm.
first-hand,
Yeah.
master class on running conventions. And
Mhm.
while we were in the middle of launching that first, literally as like within the month of us actually having that first 5 points, they got bought
By a major events company.
out of
Yeah.
out of England. And they were like, you know what, guys, this is great, but we have so much money now. You should
So
just
we're
go.
not interested in growing a convention, because they also
Right.
own Awesome Con, which was in its 5th year. So that had just broke, like making $1 million.
They went on, they were like, we're just going to go into
Yeah.
acquisition mode, and
Mm.
you guys can come back to us in like 5. So they basically sold us
for
our,
like $1. Yeah, they sold us the convention. And they
Nice.
said that they never ran a year-one convention where the energy in the place and the community and the fans were all
Mhm.
so amazing. And just like they said, they had the best experience with our community running that event.
but they were also
Wow.
annoyed because the comic book people didn't care. Like they wanted us to bring, if you remember back to that first year, Midtown Comics was there.
Yeah.
Because the 5 points really has been the story of like us picking up all the love that New York Comic Con has kicked to the curb
Mhm.
the last 15 years. So
Sure.
all the people were willing to kind of come along with us, but the
Mhm.
comic book people just didn't give a shit. And so that was kind of annoying to them because they really wanted it to be a comic book and designer toy award.
Which it could
toy
have
festival.
been if they'd have just kept going down that road.
Probably, but they
So-
were just like, you know what, we're out. So we were like, cool, and we picked up the pieces and
And it wasn't like they were just like, we're out, you're on your own. They
No,
were
they're
super
so-
amazing and helpful. And even now,
on a corporate level,
Yeah.
they were like, we're out.
right.
But on a personal level,
level,
they've been so helpful to us
Right.
behind the scenes every year. Like
And we call them up if we have an issue, we'll call
Yeah,
them up, they'll tell us how to handle
they'll
it. Like,
smooth
they're
shit out
great.
for us.
They're so
and,
great.
Yeah, they're wonderful people.
Sounds nice. I guess
Is that too
I
exciting, Paul?
no, it's
Yeah.
kind of the same story that I have with anything that DKE does. Like I always feel like I'm trying to do things to reach out, to expand to other people. And
Yeah,
I feel like whatever I do, I always just get kind of pushed back into my corner.
yeah.
So
Right.
back in the day with the Vader project, we're really trying to like expose these artists to a whole new crowd. And when
Yeah.
there was a show, record number of people would show up, but when it came to like selling them, it was okay, but it didn't. I wanted more people to come in. And so the same thing with like this Heritage auction. I watched what Heritage had done for Cause Toys over the past 2 years.
Mhm.
The market had just like, I don't know, quintupled or whatever. Like, a $500 toy is now selling for $10,000.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, if we could just get a little piece of that, of some of those douchey like hedge fund billionaires who just want a Kozik bust in their living room or whatever, like if they would just like show up and like pay attention. But they kind of it so it did fine. I give it like a B minus, but it just, I always feel just sort of like pushed back into my corner anytime we've taken this format of bootleg toys to a convention where it's like inappropriate, where it is a comic show or it is just a regular toy show. We sit there and just twiddle our thumbs, right?
It's crazy because you would think that the pop culture reference would play with those people and they would understand the connection.
They do, and they come up to the booth, they say, oh, this is amazing, and click,
Right.
click, click, they take their photo and then they walk
And they
away.
walk away.
I mean, it's affordable art, but at the end of the day, it is expensive.
Sure.
So $75, $50, $100 for a single piece. They'd rather buy a pop figure for $10 and
Absolutely.
get a free poster. So,
Yeah.
I'm always kind of dealing with that, feeling kind of, we cater to a certain audience, and that audience is into it and they love it.
Sure.
And then you think like, how do we grow the audience? And then it's like, you kind of don't like.
Had that same experience with
All the
anime.
time.
Mhm.
We have the same experience all the time.
No, but I'm saying
but
we into like the anime world,
Yeah.
And it's like people are just like they don't understand.
No, we did Anime NYC, and it was
Right.
difficult. And we even had a Hatsune Miku platform figure that we tried to like bring the two worlds together. It's just really difficult to get them the crossover. And we have that experience a lot where we try and push in different directions. We just keep going. Every time we're like turned away from one side, we just go a different way.
People ask me all the time, like, why don't we get more press? And I'm like, nobody gives a shit.
Right.
Well, they do. It just mainstream press that's hard, like, the fan press, the niche audience. Yeah, like, it's like we're just like another niche of it. It's like a niche of a niche of a niche. I mean, like toy collectors are already like in, a niche. And then it's like, this is like just, then there's the designer toys. And then this is just another little sliver of designer toys for us. Like
a genre of a subgenre.
Yeah. People say like, so what do you do? And it's like, well, and I can't believe like what I do now. Like I'm on the convention circuit. I'm an online retailer. These are things I never would have, anticipated, for my life at my age. And people say, what do you do? And it's like, well, I sell, I said I had a distribution company, but I don't have that anymore. And now like there's this group of artists that express themselves. Their medium is action figure, and I sell these things. And they're like, what? It's like some people are like, oh, that's cool. That sounds amazing. And other people are like, stay away from my children. Like, that's weird.
I've had people ask me, I'll explain what we do.
Right.
And then they'll say, but what do you do like full time?
Right.
Well,
All right. So let's go back to the convention. So what is Reed's reaction to you going out and starting your own convention?
well, we never heard anything from them directly, but the next year after the first 5 points, they moved all of the designer toy people back into the back corner where they originally
the loading dock.
Yeah.
And what year was that?
2017.
Yeah.
2017. So that was my second year doing New York Comic Con.
That year.
Right.
And that's when my booth got moved all the way to the back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's your fault, so fuck you.
Yes.
Because I had a nice, beautiful booth right up at the front. There's like beautiful corner.
We didn't want to stop doing New York Comic Con.
So that was the last time we did it because our experience was so awful that year that we were like, you know what?
We don't need to do this.
That's when we started 5 Points Fall.
Right.
Because it was like, why should we go onto the floor of New York Comic Con to sell our exclusives when we could, for the same amount of money, rent a space across town, not a full convention.
Sure.
Rent a space across town
and have
beer and pizza and nice or good food or whatever we want, and with no one telling us not to, and music and DJs. And so that's where we just turned our New York Comic Con presence into like a counter programming pop-up.
Well, they put us behind the Star Wars booths, behind guys.
I remember you had this beautiful booth, and then there was this huge black monolith, just like blocking all the traffic. And it was like, here's this thing, and then here's you guys like right here. It was like,
wow.
We made half the money that we would normally make that year.
And people that knew us and were coming to find us couldn't find us that year because it was ridiculous. And the argument of Comic-Con or any of those big conventions is that, it costs so much money to do it, but it's worth it because of the amount of eyeballs that see you. Like, and when we were in the Crystal Palace part at the front, you couldn't disagree with that because so many people had to walk past us to get anywhere else. So we could have magazines out to, thousands of people, whether they're good or not, they would get.
And we also sold all kinds of stuff in your Comic-Con that we would never normally sell. Like for your Comic-Con, we would stock up on blind boxes and
things that would
$15 items and do really well with them because you just kind of get this crush of people coming in buying that level of stuff.
But once they put us in the back, it's like you can't really justify the spend because
the one thing that the Reed shows don't have that shows like San Diego have are these line of sight rules.
Right.
And there's a very specific diagram that comes from San Diego that you are not allowed to push your booth out to the end of your booth and up 10 feet. It has to be, it's kind of like in an L shape, like that. And people, you could have an inline booth in New York And maybe it's just kind of thing about New York culture, because New York culture is like elevator culture. Everyone gets in the elevator, everyone's next to each other, but you can't acknowledge each other because like you're weird if you go hi. And they're like, "No, don't talk to me. Stay at the number and shut up." It's like because everyone's cramped in this small space.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, is like they have no qualms about putting this huge black monolith with an exit right in front of your booth, and then having this other booth with all these pretty things. So if I have an inline booth, inline meaning for those of you watching, not a corner, the person next to me could come out to the end, go up 8 feet, and just make a huge cube. And then when you're walking down the aisle, you can't see my booth.
Right.
And that's just not cool. Like,
Yeah, you can go 8 feet near Comic-Con without incurring additional charges. And then
yeah.
at 10 feet, and then when you go to 10 feet, it's like an extra $300 or something.
Because they
So
charge-
that you can pay them, but that fucks with my bottom
No,
line.
just and then you can pay even more to go to the ceiling, because you can
Well-
go all the way up, and that costs X to go all the way up.
Reed, the corporation has issues about how much money they make, and
Yeah.
I mean, that $300 should go to me. Like, you know what I mean? It's like if you're gonna just make a pole like in your booth, a 10 by 10 all the way to the ceiling, and you're gonna block visibility, and you're gonna charge more for that space, like you need to compensate me, because you're messing with my bottom line. But
the trouble with Comic-Con is that they've always pushed out anything interesting. All of the smaller artists, all of the indie artists, all of the more like interesting, smaller genres have gone. Even the people that sold like vintage toys, that year they reduced all of those people down to like.
San Diego's the same thing. It's just not making, because I did the show the year after too, and that black monolith was gone, but what was between me, like Tops and the block and where I was like the Geico booth.
Right. Which doesn't make even any sense being there.
Why is an insurance company
when they pushed designer toys to the back, because basically what happened when we started 5 Points, they were like, why are we investing all this money in this community that is now taking the love away? Because they were like, they would cut all these deals for the designer toy people, and it was like a thing to have the block. And so they're like, what, if we just push the block back into the loading dock, we can sell the Crystal Palace for an extra $1 million worth of corporate level booths. Because the year that we all got pushed back, it was Uniqlo, Wacom, Gillette, Geico, and I'm trying.
I mean, I get it. They're running a business. They don't care about how much money I make, but
but they should worry about their fans and their supporters and how interested it is to them. And is it interesting for them to come in and walk into another Uniqlo, which they could go to on Union Square? Or is it interesting to walk into a group of artists and makers that are doing something interesting and pop culture, adjacent?
I mean, I agree with you, but I understand. I don't like what they did, but I understand why they did it. It's because that pays money. I was always lobbying for a corner booth, and a corner booth is extra, but I only get that after, because there's like 2 tiers of payments. There's like a corporate corner, and then there's like a dealer corner. And my cost goes up, $800 for the corner. But if they get a corporate sponsor, interested, that's like that booth price is doubled.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that's something that doesn't exist in San Diego, but whatever, good for them.
San Diego's a nonprofit, right? It's a nonprofit organization.
Correct.
Well, nonprofit.
Yes. Yeah, but it's true. They don't
trust in,
yeah.
People talk.
I think Barbarian Rage says the Geico booth is always my favorite. I love insurance. Thank you, Scott.
What's crazy about the Geico booth though? They're like every hour they would throw stuff off the top of the bus.
Who loves money?
And they would shout with the megaphone and throw like lizard toys, and everyone would be screaming like there was a rock star standing on top of the like bus. It was insane. Yeah, insane. What people will do for something free, it's crazy.
Good for them.
Shit on the fans of New York Comic Con. People like having something fun to go to, but I mean, we love that we've carved out a corner of the universe. That's our little corner of the universe. And so, for 5 Points 2020, 2021, like we've always had a beer garden, we've had live painting, This year we're expanding our tattoo area into a whole tattoo parlor. We're gonna have artists and just making it like an experience where you want to come and spend the whole weekend. You know, the point of coming to like New York Comic Con, you're kind of like in and out. You get this crush. Same thing with San Diego, and then you need to kind of get out. With 5 Points, we want people to come, hang out, spend the whole day, eat food, see their friends, get a tattoo, get drunk, and then come to the Designer Toy Awards at night and come back on Sunday and kind of commiserate about how drunk we got on Saturday night.
Right. Our vendor experience really cool too. Like we'll let people ship stuff to us and we'll take it down, and we have free coffee for vendors in the morning, and just
free water,
try and make it the best it can be for everybody, because conventions are hard work. They just are for everybody. Like you're on your feet, you're talking all the time. So anything that we can do to make it just a little bit better, we try.
Free water in New York. That's like a big deal.
You know.
Yeah, and free coffee.
Free bathrooms too. Like
exactly.
Wow.
Can we? We don't need to talk about the bathrooms at New York.
No.
Okay, I'm just going to talk about the bathrooms in the Javits Center, because that would be so illegal in California.
It should be.
Every entrance of San Diego Comic-Con has a men's and women's bathroom, and in that whole room, for 100,000 people, there are 2 usable bathrooms.
Terrible.
And that's only in New York.
I know.
It's like.
It's awful. And then if you couldn't venture out and go downstairs to the bathrooms, and that's where all the cosplayers are, so they just in the mirrors, like you can't. You're like, oh my god!
It's like someone with wings, just
exactly. Trying to duck down around the costumes.
I mean,
and they're like trying to do themselves up, and they come out of the toilets, and they're like, oh my god, I can't. They try and find somebody to help them redo their costumes up because they were so elaborate.
Yeah, and
amazing.
By Sunday, the men's rooms are unusable.
Oh, they're gross. Yeah.
I mean, if a men's room is unusable, we're talking about just like unusable for like a man who like stands up to urinate. Like you can say how bad that is.
Right.
It's like.
It's all union. They don't give a shit. They're just like whatever. Yeah, it's all union run. So take it as the one.
Such is life. All right, guys. I really appreciate the time. Thank you for giving us a little piece of your history and for all that you do for the resin community. I know that everyone, looks forward to the In-Action show. I look forward to the In-Action show as a customer or as a sucker. And, I always wait for that stuff to go online.
We're excited for next year. So, if everybody wants to join in next year, new artists, hit us up, please. We're always looking for new people, and it's hard to keep track of all the new artists that come out. So we always look at what you're doing to see who we can hit up. So
they all want to be part of it. So awesome. Good. Yeah. Just if you haven't heard from us, please send us an email.
Send us
don't DM us. Send us an email.
I'll keep on top of all the correspondence.
In info@clutter.toys.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, Dove.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much for everything you do, Dove. Awesome. Thank you for who you've been for this industry. Like you're the man. We love you.
Without you, none of this would have ever been possible.
Yes.
And that's true.
I don't think that that's true.
Yes, it is. Stop
Take some credit.
Yes,
Take some credit.
You're talking about the people who run a magazine, a gallery, an online store, manufacture toys, make their own toys, run a convention.
Oh, come on.
Come on, man. Take some credit.
Take the credit.
Whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one. That was wonderful. Always lovely to catch up. Woo-hoo.